To be, or not to be, is the opening phrase of a soliloquy in the Nunnery Scene of William Shakespeare's play Hamlet. In the speech, a despondent or feigning Prince Hamlet contemplates death and suicide. He bemoans the pains and unfairness of life but acknowledges the alternative might be still worse. The speech functions within the play to explain Hamlet's hesitation to directly and immediately avenge his father's murder on his uncle, stepfather, and new king Claudius. Claudius and his minister Polonius are preparing to eavesdrop on Hamlet's interaction with Ophelia. Text. This version of the portfolio preserves most of the first folio text, with updated spelling and 4 common emendations introduced from the second quarto. To be, or not to be, that is the question whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep no more. And by a sleep, to say we end, the heartache, and the 1,000 natural shocks, that flesh is heir to? 'Tis a consummation, devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect, that makes calamity of so long life, the who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the lawa unregistered trademark's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns, that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make, with a bare bodkin. Who would these fardels bear, to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne, no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have, than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution, is sicklied o'er, with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment, with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action. Soft you now, the fair Ophelia. Nymph, in all thy orisons, be thou all my sins remembered. First quarto. The first edition of Hamlet in print was the 1603 first quarto, which some have argued represents a bad quarto rather than a first draft or touring copy of Shakespeare's script. This is a shorter version of the speech. 8. For ease of comparison the spelling here is updated as above. To be, or not to be, there's the point, to die, to sleep, is that all? No, to sleep, to dream, I marry there it goes, for in that dream of death, when we awake, and borne before an everlasting judge, from whence no passenger ever returned, the undiscovered country, at whose sight, the happy smile, and the accursed damned. But for this, the joyful hope of this, who'd bear the scorns and flattery of the world, scorned by the right rich, the rich cursed of the poor. The widow being oppressed, the orphan wronged, the taste of hunger, or a tyrant's reign, and 1,000 more calamities besides, to grunt and sweat under this weary life, when that he may his full quietus make, with a bare bodkin, who would this endure, but for a hope of something after death? Which puzzles the brain, and doth confound the sense, which makes us rather bear those evils we have, than fly to others that we know not of. This conscience makes cowards of us all, lady in thy orisons, be all my sins remembered. Second quarto. The second quarto presented a form closer to the one in present use. Major changes to the presentation of the scene include moving King Claudius and Polonius's decision to confront Hamlet with Ophelia earlier in the play and the addition of soft you now, suggesting that Hamlet has not seen Ophelia thus far during his speech. Other sections of the text were also much expanded from the first quarto edition. In a new passage closely paralleling the opening of Hamlet's soliloquy, one of the watchmen Bernardo tells Horatio concerning the ghost they saw, I think it be no other, but Enzo. Well may it sort that this portentous figure comes armed through our watch so like the king that was and is the question of these wars between Denmark and Norway, to which Horatio replies, a moth it is to trouble the mind's eye. To be, or not to be, that is the key tion, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to angstrom the angstrom lings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take Armagana ta angstrom a of troubles, and by oppoing, and them, to die to angstrom leap, no more, and by a angstrom leap, to angstrom I we end, the heartache, and the thoa and natural angstrom hox, that flee is era to. Tis a conjugation, do outly to be rht to die to angstrom leap, perchance to dream, I there's the rub, for in that angstrom leap of death what dreams may come, when we who angstrom huffled off this mortal coil, muati jayu versus porui, there's the repect, that makes calamity of angstrom o long life, the who would bear the whips and angstrom corns of time, the pre-angstromals wrong, the brood man's contumely, the pangs of deep isotlu, the law's delay, the ina olunts of office, and the angstrom perns, that patient merit of thievenworthy takes, when he him ill femite his quietars make, with a bare bodkin. Who would fartles beer, to grunt an angstrom wet vnder a weary life, but that the dread of angstrom a mething after death, the vndia curat country, from whose bourne, no traula returns, puzzles the will, and makes verses rather bear our eels we whore, than fly to others we know not of. Thus connoissance does make cowards, and thus the nitiuyo of re-elution, is angstrom or with a pale courtier of thought, and entropria is of great pitch and moment, with this regard the occurrence turn awry, and loose the name of action. Soft you now, the fair Ophelia, nymph in thy orisons, be all my angstrom innis remembred. First folio Mr. William Shakespeare's Comedies, Histories, and Tragedies, published by Isaac Jaggard and Ed Blunt in 1623 and better known as the First Folio, includes an edition of Hamlet largely similar to the second quarto. To be, or not to be, that is the key tion, whether a Euro unregistered trademark tis nobler in the mind to angstromifer, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take Armagana a sea of troubles, and by oppoing end them, to die, to angstrom leap, no more. And by a angstrom leap, to say we end, the heartache, and the thoa and natural angstrom hox, that flee is heir to. A Euro unregistered trademark tis a consummation, do outly to be our ha Euro unregistered trademark d. To die to sleep, to angstrom leap, perchance to dream. I, theory a Euro unregistered trademark s the rub, for in that angstrom leap of death, what dreams may come, when we who angstrom huffle a Euro unregistered trademark d of this mortal coil, muati jayu versus porui. Theory a Euro unregistered trademark s the respect, that makes calamity of angstrom o long life, the who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the pre-angstromals wrong, the poor man's contumely, the pangs of dire prize a Euro unregistered trademark d lu, the law's delay, the ina olunts of office, and the spurns, that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he him ill femite his quietas make, with a bare bodkin. Who would theory fartles beer, to grunt an angstrom wet vnder a weary life, but that the dread of angstrom a mething after death, the vndia could counter from woe we born, no traula returns, puzzles the will, and makes verses rather bear those ills we whore, than fly to others that we know not of. Thus connoissance does make cowards of verses all, and thus the nitiu hue of resolution, is angstrom o Euro unregistered trademark re, with the pale courtier of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment, with this regard their currents turn away, and lure the name of action. Soft you now, the fair Ophelia? Nymph, in thy orisons, be all my angstrom innis remembred. Cultural impact, the line to be, or not to be is widely quoted in modern English and the soliloquy has been referenced in many works of theatre, literature and music. References. External links, Hamlet's To Be or Not to Be soliloquy translated into modern English, The Fishko Files, The Many Faces of Hamlet from WNYC's Sarah Fishko, a radio piece and accompanying blog post about the many interpretations of the soliloquy.